Well, there were thousands gathering again in Cairo's Tahrir Square, despite a violent crackdown by police. Also, Egypt's stock exchange has suspended trading as the protests escalate. Youssef Kamal al-Din is in Cairo, and he has an update on the situation there. And Youssef, can you bring us up to speed?
Well, Becky, a set of dramatic developments this morning. Again, there were calls for a million-man march, and as you can see probably from some of the live images from the square, the crowds are growing steadily. Again, it is expected to continue growing throughout the day. That is what tends to happen. What is this all about, you ask? These are images reminiscent from those that we saw earlier this year. You can see the pictures here. They're growing indeed quite significantly. We had yesterday several tens of thousands. This is about protesters unhappy with the way the military council, which is basically ruling the country, is handling the transition to democracy, if at all. Because there are some out there who think that the military council, under the field marshal Hussein Tantawi, is digging in his heels and is basically in it for the long run. So what is happening today is a stand against that. They want the military council to finally hand over power to a civilian authority, as was conceived at the very beginning of this, when all of this fell in February. This was the whole point, a transition to democracy, and that is why we've heard so many voices from the international community criticizing the lengthy transition. At the same time, all of this is happening at a critical juncture in this nascent transition to this democracy, because we're just days away from the start of parliamentary elections, which are now being thrown into doubt by some people on this political spectrum. You mentioned the Egyptian stock exchange. Investors are really anxious. They don't like this political uncertainty when they see it. We saw the reaction on Sunday. We saw it on Monday, down 4%. And today it hit the circuit breakers past 5%. Trade was suspended on that front. Andrew.
Youssef, thanks so much. Appreciate it very, very much this morning.
You know, Youssef, while we have you there, is the mood any different this time than we saw back in the spring? I mean, we hear about the violence escalating. We hear about what's happening on the streets. But when you're talking to people there, is this a different mood than we saw with the Arab Spring?
It is a different mood. You could say that in February it was quite easy to identify who was fighting who. It was the incumbent government, particularly high-ranking officials, and broadly speaking, the people. Now you have a very diverse political spectrum. There's so many different ideologies, so many different parties with competing interests, and everybody wants a share of this cake, which is this political vacuum. So it's difficult to really ascertain as to who's doing what and who's responsible for what. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lack of organization in general, and there's a lack of predictability. That makes this so dicey, and that's why there's so much at stake, and that is why the international community is watching so closely. We had the White House spokesman come out the other day and say, you know what, we are urging restraint, and we want those elections to go forward. Despite the violence, there needs to be that transition to democracy to get some more stability in, because some are saying you can't just have the military being the only reliable institution in the country, and basically they are not necessarily the best people to be running the country. You need a civilian government that has the training and the experience to be able to run the country effectively.
Youssef, thanks so much. Some amazing images and an amazing report this morning.